I'm going to hand over the mic to you and you can begin to tell us.
Yeah, so we were kind of open to pregnancy when we got pregnant, but we had just gotten married in November and we got pregnant in January. And I originally was like, oh, we'll probably wait a few years, travel, whatnot, but God had other plans. And when I found out, or I had a suspicion I was pregnant, I immediately had emailed whatever doctor was on file for our insurance at the time. And I was like, I got a negative pregnancy test, but my period is late. I feel like I'm pregnant. And she's like, well, pregnancy tests are incredibly accurate. You're not pregnant. And I remember when I took that first test, I cried when it was negative. It kind of surprised me because I didn't realize at the time how much I wanted to be. And
Yeah.
another few weeks passed, and I kept taking tests every few days. And it took about 2 weeks after my missed period to get a positive. So it took a while after that.
Wow.
And
I do feel like that's not super common, right?
yeah, it
That's
it was it was kind of trippy because when I finally got a line, I was like, it was hard to feel like celebratory because I was still like, is that right? I've had so
you're
many
like, am I
negatives.
hallucinating?
Yeah, it didn't feel real for a while. And at that time, I was like, okay, I'm pregnant. Um, I'm gonna make an appointment with the doctor and go in and get an ultrasound, make sure baby's in the right spot. So around 9 weeks, I went in. And something that was immediately off putting was the amount of times they asked me if I wanted an abortion.
Wow.
And that, for me, was so alarming because when they hand you the paperwork to fill out, it's like, were you actively trying? How old are you? And I was 21 when I got pregnant, so I was younger. And just off of that, they were like, "Are you sure you want to keep the baby?" And
That
that
is
I
insane.
should have stopped with the medical system at that point, but I was like, okay, let's just keep going, whatever. I'm going to ignore it. And everything I knew I didn't want any vaccines during pregnancy. I knew I didn't want genetic testing because it wouldn't change my course of action for anything. But they did the internal ultrasound, which I was not informed it was going to be an internal one. I thought it was going to be the over the belly at 9 weeks. Saw the baby. She basically reprimanded me for not wanting to get the flu vaccine. And I left that appointment and then was like, okay, I'm going to do one more for the anatomy scan. But outside of that, I'm not doing appointments. Which was so silly to be like, you know what, the anatomy scan, because then it'll let me know if the baby's okay, which is just, it's silly looking back on it. But when you don't know, you don't know. And at the
Exactly.
time, I wasn't knowing.
Yeah,
So I
and
went
this
about
is
my
your first
pregnancy.
pregnancy
Yeah.
and you're 21 and we're not taught in school anything about
Yeah.
anything that is of
Yeah.
value, really.
Mm-hmm.
So, there's so much undoing that we have to do when we're in these like, big moments in life. It's like we're figuring it out on the fly.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And I was so far removed from any form of education around like my cycle and birth and pregnancy. My mom didn't let me take sex ed in school, which probably on one hand was good. It wasn't good sex ed in California. But on the other hand, like when I had gotten my first period, I had no clue what was happening. I started it at school and was like, Mom, I'm bleeding. Like I had no idea what was going on. So I was like blank slate on that line, but still was trying to feel out, okay, what feels natural in pregnancy and what feels unnatural. And I continued to go about, and this weird thing had happened about a year before I got pregnant. I worked at this company, and it was the same company my mom worked at. We had a family friend who was dating someone at the time, and she would come into the office and say hi to us. She was talking one day about how her daughter had left the medical system and was starting to become a home birth midwife. And so I hear this conversation. I'm like, oh, that's kind of cool. I'm just going to put that in my brain for way down the line when I have a baby. So when I found out I was pregnant, I immediately was like, okay, I want to get in contact with that girl because I'm kind of interested about that. So when I announced that 16 weeks to her family, I immediately then texted that friend and was like, can you give me your daughter's contact? I would love to have a conversation with her. Because at this time, I was assuming I'm going to go into a birth center or maybe have a home birth midwife, still medical. We have a call with her, just kind of talking about what we want. And I hadn't ever heard of free birth or sovereign birth, but throughout our call, she was kind of planting these little seeds of stuff and like these questions of like, what do you want out of a birth? And she had said something that really took me aback at the time. She was like, I'm not going to do anything at your birth. Like, if you want me to do a massage or something, I'll do that. But I'm like, if your baby's born, I'm not performing CPR. And I was like, what? Why wouldn't she do that? And so at the end of our call, she's like, can I pray for you guys? And just like end the call on that note. So she prayed for us. We got off. And I was like, thinking about it, I was really taken aback of like, what? Why wouldn't she do that? And then I was like, would I want her to do that? No, I actually wouldn't. Why is that like offensive to me? And we sat on it for a few more weeks and we ended up being, okay, we're going to move forward with a birthkeeper. And that was her, the radical
So
birthkeeper.
she was a birth keep. So she's a birth keeper, not a
Mm-hmm.
midwife.
Not a midwife. She's a radical birthkeeper.
Wow.
And
That
so
is
there was
very
just this
rare
like
to just
God
stumble
thing.
upon.
Yeah, that I had heard this one conversation. I overheard it. I wasn't even a part of this conversation. And I kept it in my brain. And then I got pregnant about a year later and
Wow.
remembered this conversation was like, I need to get in contact with that person. And so that kind of helped lead me down this path of like sovereign birth. So I still did do one more ultrasound. I did the one at like 19 weeks for the anatomy scan. And during that ultrasound, they told me that the baby might have trisomy 18. And it
Might
was just
have.
kind of, yeah, it was like they have this choroid plexus cyst in the brain, which is an indicator of trisomy 18. Um, and I'd already declined multiple times any form of genetic testing. And so they just kind of were doubling down on that. And at that point, I went home and talked to my husband, and I was like, well, what if the baby does have this? Wouldn't change anything we're going to do. Wouldn't change how we'd want to birth. So that was the last appointment that I did, just kind of cut off them, and they didn't really ever call back. So it just kind of worked out. But we did have to sit with that of what if they do have this genetic disorder, and would that change what we want to do moving forward? But I mean, I had, classic morning sickness and then night sickness. But aside from that, pregnancy was pretty easygoing. It wasn't dramatic, aside from the few appointments where it was just harassment. They made us talk to like we chose to talk to like a counselor. That was like protocol through Kaiser, was you have to sit with a counselor individually and get like interviewed to see like if there's any abuse going on and whatnot.
Wait,
It
this is
was really
just
big.
standard prenatal care, or
Yeah, they set up everyone with a like family counselor. That was standard, and they were like hounding me with phone calls to set up an appointment. I'm like, I don't feel like we need to talk to anyone. And eventually we did one. It was like 15-minute call, and she's like, yeah, you guys sound like you're fine. I'm like, I mean, I could have told you that.
that's
Oh.
so wildly invasive?
They wouldn't book the anatomy scan until we did that.
I even get bothered when the doctors ask me like slightly personal
Yeah,
questions. I'm like, I don't think that you have the right to know this information. Like, how is this
yeah,
relevant to what I came here for? But like, that's another level. So you're in
yeah.
California.
Yes, California,
Okay.
Central Valley. So yeah,
Yeah, they're one of the tough ones.
yeah, it was really hard to get them to leave me alone about like vaccination and whatnot. They were really pushing it for the few appointments that I went to. It was just like condescending, like, well, do you know what could happen if you don't? And just acting like I'm stupid. So it was a whole thing. Um, oh, I forgot to tell you something from way at the beginning. This was the day that I took a test and it was positive. It was a Sunday morning. I hadn't told anyone aside from my husband, and I go to church. I'm at church all day long. Afterwards, we're doing stuff to, put away, like from serving and whatnot, and I'm lingering around. And there's this really sweet lady at our church. She barely speaks English. She comes up to me and puts her hand on my stomach and was like, "Congratulations."
Wow.
Like, what? She's like, "You're pregnant." And I'm like, what? And she read to me out of Luke where, like, she wrote down the verse where the angel appears to Mary and says, "You have found favor with God." And, like, she had written that down, handed it to me. She's
I
like,
have
"This is for you and your
goosebumps.
husband." It was so, it was, it was so chilling. Like,
Yeah.
just having that. And I felt like so at peace with everything of like, oh my gosh, this is,
Yeah.
wow, that was so trippy. And so I always forget that that even happened because it was just such a, like, kind of like a prophesying type of a thing. Because how did you know that? Obviously from
Yeah.
God, like a word of knowledge. But
That's
yeah.
beautiful. I love that. So after you had the the anatomy
Hmm.
scan,
Hmm.
did you stop seeing the OBGYN completely?
Yes, at that point, after we got the ultrasound results back, I cut off anything medical.
And so what was your prenatal care like, or your prenatal experience like, at that point after getting the anatomy scan, were you seeing the birthkeeper?
Yeah, she would come over about once a month. And then in the third trimester, she came over like 2 times a month. So she would just come over, we'd sit down, and for about hour, hour and a half, just talk about the birth, talk about our fears, talk about, okay, if it's a stillbirth, what do we want to do? Who do we want around? What do we kind of want roles to look like? What would I then want to transfer to the hospital for? Like, is there anything that I'm like, if this happens, I'd want to go? And just talking through all these things. Like, it's funny because I wasn't necessarily scared of anything relating to birth, but the one fear that I could name was the like cord around the neck because my mom told me that I almost died being born with the cord around my neck. So I was like, I know this is silly, but can't we just talk about it? And so it was a lot of fear work for both me and my husband, like helping him move through those things. And she brought over like little fetoscope, so that was fun to like listen to the baby. And it was just very relaxing, just talking and spending time together. Um and when we got near the end, yeah, doing 2 times a month, and I think we did a few phone calls, but um I did also, in the last one, I had my sister also at my birth. And so she was training to be a doula at the time, and I wanted her to be present for my birth. So she started joining the prenatals at the end just so that we could all discuss kind of what we wanted to happen. They could practice setting up the pool because I did get a birth pool. Um, so, and that was something that we had to set up like the day of the birth because we have cats. So they would pop the pool if it was just left around for
Yeah.
however long. Um, but that was about it. It was just talking about pregnancy.
Yeah.
Very, very uneventful, but also very, very refreshing. And it just felt like a sisterhood, and I loved it. So,
That's beautiful. Yeah, it's the deep, meaningful birth work that I personally feel is more important than any other type of, birth prep, prenatal
yeah.
care, like whatever you want to call it. Um, It's so, so valuable and can
Yeah.
just change your entire experience.
Oh
Um,
yeah. It made it very positive. Like I never left the doctor's appointment feeling positive. I left it just feeling anxious and icky. And I was like, I'm not doing that anymore. Like every
yeah.
time I leave, I feel like violated or put down. And that's not what it should be like when you're pregnant. They tell you don't stress, the baby feels it, but then all they do is stress you out when you go in.
Yeah. The amount of women that I have spoken to and listened to their stories, they it's crazy how many women have high blood pressure only when they go
Oh,
into the doctor's office.
yep.
But then when they're like not at the doctor's office,
Yeah.
they're completely normal. Just like
Yeah.
it's so yeah, it's definitely a place where I think most people are fearful of just the energy of the space, but
Yeah.
on top of that, there's so much fear mongering that actively takes place like during appointments that
Yeah.
it's just a recipe for disaster. No wonder why so many women are pushed into unnecessary intervention just because
Hmm.
their body is literally responding to the fear mongering that's happening. Um,
Yeah.
okay, so what are the like last few weeks of pregnancy like leading into birth, and then you can just get into the birth story.
Yeah. So it was like a last minute baby shower. We had a baby shower in October. Then at the end of October, I had gone to my cousin's wedding. I was a bridesmaid in it at like 39 weeks pregnant. And
I love that.
I was in bed by like 8 p.m. for her wedding. And um, it was just keeping busy. It was, I'm going to keep doing things until I can't anymore. I felt fine. I was still playing pickleball. I was staying active and I felt great. I felt great in the last trimester. I was just sleeping like 10 hours, 12 hours at night. So lots of naps. But I was waiting because I never felt like I got that like big pregnant belly. So I was waiting for that. And I kept pushing my maternity photos further and further out because I was like, maybe I'll get that big belly. So that first week of November, spoiler alert, I go into labor that Saturday. So my baby's born on the 5th, Saturday was the 4th. That Thursday, I took my maternity photos. So maternity photos 2 days before I go into labor, and we have one final date night. We go out to our favorite like Japanese restaurant. I ate so much salmon. It just it felt like a good time to have a last date night. And I'm like, this might be our last one before the baby's here, but I'm not sure. Because mentally, I thought I would have our baby like mid-November, like around our anniversary. So it was at the beginning, I'm like, I feel like I'm not gonna have a baby for another 2 or 3 weeks. Friday, I have to take my cat to the vet because she decided to start throwing up all over the place. So take her to the vet. I'm stressed about her. I think she's dying. And I'm like crying all the time.
Oh,
She's at the vet, and I go to do my sister's hair because I'm also a hairstylist. And I'm like having pains the whole time I'm doing hair. And I'm just kind of ignoring it. I'm like, that's just pregnancy stuff. I don't really pay much attention to it. Get my cat. She's fine, just dramatic. And then later, I kind of think she just freaked out because she could tell I was going into labor and she was acting up because of that. So next time, not going to pay attention if she starts acting all
no,
strange.
it's true.
Yeah.
They can sense all of that. Dogs too.
Yeah. And she hated me the whole time I was pregnant. Like I'd walk into a room and she would leave the room. So it's
Oh, she
it's
felt
just
like she
so
was
funny
being
because
replaced.
she did not like it, but now she thinks it's her baby. Like she thinks he is her baby, so she's obsessed with him. Um, Friday night we have a friend over for dinner, And we decide the next day we're going to have him back over to watch a movie that he hasn't ever seen and go to sleep. I have really bad insomnia, third trimester. I'm just kind of tossing and turning all night. I wake up around 12 after not really sleeping. Maybe I got 3 hours of sleep. And I'm just having like a lot of pain, and it's like hip pain. And I'm like, that's odd. I'm trying to ignore it, sleep. I'm like trying to breathe through it like I have been all day. And I just kind of keep getting up and walking around, going to the bathroom. And around 3 in the morning, I'm like, okay, I think this is labor because I'm not able to really go back to sleep. This is happening consistently. I like downloaded a contraction timer, and the part that surprised me was the sensation was nothing like what I thought labor would feel like. It felt like, so if this is my hip, it felt like my bones were going like this and trying to snap. That was my contraction feeling. So
Interesting.
it wasn't anywhere of like this tightness on the belly or anything that I felt. It felt like my hip bones were trying to like turn and snap. And I'm like, okay, this is weird. So I timed it, and it was like every 3 minutes, a minute and a half long. I was like, okay, that sounds like labor. So I woke up my husband at 4 in the morning and was like, hey, I think I'm in labor. And he tells me, he's like, okay, I'm really tired, so I'm going to go back to sleep. Let me know if you need anything. And I was just like,
Gotta love it.
okay, I'm going to go take a shower then. Like, I thought for sure he would be like wide awake, like, oh my gosh. No. He was like so unbothered by it. I'm like, these home birth dads, they're wild. I spent some time in the shower, and around 7 called my sister and let her know. She also was kind of like, can I shower first? Like, do I need to come over yet? I'm like, come over whenever. Just letting you know. Start to head over. And I called our birthkeeper, and she was actually about an hour further where she normally lives. They were visiting family. So she starts to make her way over. We were supposed to be setting up the nursery that day with my husband's family, like moving furniture, building a bed, all that stuff. So we call them and tell them that's not going to happen today. And we also were going to be installing blackout curtains around the house because I wanted it to be dark while I was in labor. So my husband is running around the house frantically on a ladder, like drilling in these curtain rods. And when people arrived, it was probably 9 a.m. My labor slowed down at that point, and it was like 8 to 10 minutes apart. We watched a movie, we played a board game, ate food, had hot chocolate, and it stayed really far apart the rest of the labor. It didn't ever really shorten back up again. So they get the pool set up. I got in it, I think it was around like 3 or 4 p.m. at that point. So time had passed. I was in the pool for a while, and eventually I was like, okay, I'm going to get out. Like, I don't want to be in it anymore. Go to the bathroom, and I lose my mucus plug right at 4:20. My sister saw it and giggled like the time. So that's how she remembered that. But my husband, he sees it come out, and he yells for our birthkeeper. He's like, what is this? And she comes over and she just goes, oh, it's your mucus plug. Just like, of course it is.
Yeah.
And the only thing I prayed that morning was, God, please let me feel my water break so I know I'm in labor. That was something that I was like, I really want to know. And I feel like that was part of me still controlling and being like, this is something I can hold on to and know for certain. And I did not ever feel my water break. But I did lose the mucus plug and eventually get back into the pool. Tried being on the bed for a while, and that was excruciating. I had a lot of like back pain too. Got back in the water, was in there, and at one point I heard someone say that it was 7 p.m. And I was like, please, no one else say a time. Because I didn't want to get in my head
Yeah.
of like, I've been in labor for that long. Um, but after that, I don't even think I said it out loud. It's just they kind of like caught a vibe of like, oh, we shouldn't say that. Because it was blackout window, so I had no clue what time it was. There was fairy
Pulls
light.
you out of the little the protective birth bubble that
Yeah,
we go into when you
yeah,
start to have that awareness
yeah,
around things that don't even exist, like
yeah,
time, and
yeah,
it's super distracting.
yeah. My husband had asked. That's what it was. He had asked, "What time is it?" And so my sister responded, and after that, she was like, "Don't ask again. Like, don't ask." So around this time too, he gets out of the pool and he starts kind of getting in his head, and he's like, "I don't think she's actually in labor." Like he's like starting to spiral. And so I didn't know this even happened until after the birth, but her birth keeper just sat with him and listened, and he talked, and he pulled out a book and was reading through the book trying to find something about prodromal labor, and he's like, I think that's this. And eventually he processed enough to where he was like, no, I'm being ridiculous, she's in labor. Like, and then got back in the tub, and she was just like, I'm so glad he figured that out. Like, I am so glad that I didn't have to like talk him off a ledge.
For
But
sure, and that you didn't have to have the awareness around
mm-hmm.
his beliefs around this,
Yeah,
and it's such a part of, like, the programming that we go through,
yeah,
just like that labor has to look like this, and you have to
yeah.
be screaming with your legs open, and like,
Mm-hmm.
all of the Hollywood
Yeah,
brainwashing.
yeah. And at this point, I was in between contractions, and all my contractions, they were like 3 minutes long. They were really long and really far apart. Like, I would have really long breaks in between, but they lasted a long time. And
That's long.
it felt long. It did. And in between them, I would float in the water like a starfish and sleep and
Wow.
just pray, and like it was so like internal, like I was almost watching myself like in this labor and just like praying like, God, thank you for this, and like get me through this. And it just was very connecting, and it was really great to have that because I had a hard time during pregnancy like connecting to God and like being able to like pray. Like it was like pulling teeth for me to pray, and I've never had that before. So having this experience during labor, that was really healing. Going into postpartum, having like better foundation of faith than when I was in pregnancy. So I was taking mini naps, and I started pushing at some point. It was about, I don't know, 2 or 3 hours of pushing, but like I couldn't stop it. Like it was just going. And I was leaning over the edge of the tub. I was in the pool, leaning over the edge, and my husband was behind me. And at one point, um, it's funny because I didn't even notice my birth keeper or my sister for like 99% of the birth. But if I needed something, they were right there for me to ask for it or to like offer water without me asking. Or it was just the right amount of like here to help, but I didn't feel them in my space.
Mm,
I'm sure subconsciously you still feel them around. So I think about that often of would my labor have halted if they didn't arrive or whatnot? Or would that have just my normal flow of labor? I don't know. But at one point I was holding onto my birth keeper's like neck, leaning over the pool and like bearing down. And she probably burst an eardrum because I was not the like quiet breathe your baby out. I was like roar your baby out. Um, and I was pushing, and we did not know the gender of our baby. And around this stage, everyone started saying he, which was interesting. And my sister was adamant it was a girl. But around this point, she was like, Annalie, he's almost here. Like, you're so close, you can do this. And everyone started referring to the baby as he. And so that was kind of cool. And once the head emerged, it was like zero pain. Zero pain. I was laughing and smiling, and I paused and was like thinking to myself, is he okay? Like, is the baby okay? And I could feel him kicking around inside of me, and I could feel him turn his body, so turning his shoulders, and I am laughing hysterically, just like, come on, baby, come on down, like, we're ready to meet you, like, just smiling. And it was maybe a few more seconds, and the baby just shot out. Like, I don't even remember there being a contraction or me pushing. He just shot out. And my husband caught him, and the cord was wrapped around him twice. So my birth keeper just slipped it off because I was still like in labor land, just not really knowing that, like, oh, okay, now I can turn around and hold my baby. So she slipped it off because my husband was just sobbing, holding him, like, oh my gosh.
Oh, so sweet.
And so they helped me kind of turn around. And my husband, I also didn't know that this happened until afterwards. He didn't think about once the baby comes up out of the water, you do not pass him back under the water. And so he dunks him back under to get him under my leg and then hands him up to me. He was fine, but there was like audible gasp, like just like, oh, he did not just do that. He did.
Oh,
But he's like, I didn't
it's
know
so
you were supposed to do that.
cute though.
Yeah. And he didn't really cry. Like, he did the tiniest little, like, meh. And then that was it. And he just sat there looking at all of us, and he was just content. And my husband, you know, right when he caught him, he shouted, like, it's a boy. And he's just crying. It was a beautiful way to, like, meet him. And I find it so funny because I never felt my water break. And he had the double wrapped cord, which was my one birth fear I could think of, which was so ridiculous. And they both were just non-problems. Just completely non-problems. We sat in the pool for a little while. We popped some Prosecco and had some
I love
celebratory
that.
Prosecco. It was like lukewarm. It tasted horrible. But both celebratory Prosecco, and then we sat and I fed him. He latched no problem. I never had any pain or issues with breastfeeding. It came very easily. And then we
Oh,
eventually,
what about the placenta?
yeah, so I think it took maybe hour and a half. But when we got up and out of the pool, we moved to the bedroom and I birthed the placenta in there. So I just kind of like squatted on the bed, like next to the bed, and just kind of pushed a bit and it came out. So it was pretty uneventful, but my husband at that point then got like woozy from all the blood because he's just kind of a little woozy to begin with. So we sent him away, like, hey, you go take a shower, clean up. And we did like a tour of the placenta, just kind of looking around it. And I don't remember what type of cord it was called, but I had a really interesting way that the cord had inserted. It wasn't the typical way. So that was kind of cool to see. And
Was
then
it a filamentous cord?
I think that might have been it. So it was interesting to see that. And then that was about it. Like, he was born 2 minutes after midnight, so it was on the 5th.
Oh,
And yeah.
sweet. That's such a sweet birth story. So how was your postpartum? How was your healing? And yeah, if you want to walk us
I
through.
had, like, the worries of, like, going to the bathroom. I wasn't ever worried about the birth. I was worried about postpartum. I was like, that sounds painful postpartum. And so the first time I went to the bathroom, it stung a little. But after that, it was like nothing. So it was like back to normal. I was swollen for maybe a few weeks. But I do think because I felt so good from my birth, I pushed myself a little too hard. So next time, I'm not getting out of bed to do like visitors because I wanted to see people. I was like, I just had my dream birth. I
Yeah.
want to go see people. Like, come look at my baby. And one of my best friends, she got sick right when my baby was born. So she wasn't able to like come over, and that made me really sad because I wanted nothing more than for her to like come and just sit with me and like be like, look, I made this. Like, so I do
Right?
feel like I was
Celebrate
missing that.
me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was missing that postpartum with like moms. I didn't really have
Yeah.
that community yet. So,
That's very common, I find, especially like after having a sovereign birth and it's very much a part of the physiological experience to
mhm.
have so much energy
Yeah,
after giving birth. Like
I felt
people,
high for like a week.
yeah, yeah. And I mean, I couldn't sleep. Like the
Yeah,
first night, I was like, wait, what? I looked at my husband. I'm like, you're going to bed? Like,
yeah,
what? Wait, let's celebrate. Like, this is
yeah.
amazing. And it's the challenge of like, okay, how do I still give myself the time to
Mhm.
rest and heal without overdoing it? But like, what do I do with all this energy that I have, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah, I was wanting to go out and about and see people and do things. Like, yeah, I just felt like high off of the birth. I was like, wow, so many hormones just flooding. Like, that after birth high was like real. Like it just all those good hormones. So, um, my birth keeper came a few times and just kind of sat with me. She did a manicure one of the days. Like,
Oh,
she, asked me if I wanted to share my story with her and just like sitting with me and just wanted to chat about it. So, asked me if I had any questions with feeding because she's at IBCLC as well. So, it was very non dramatic, the postpartum, which I was worried about going into birth was the postpartum. So, I was worried about like postpartum depression and anxiety because it just affects so many people, but also so many people are traumatized in birth,
yeah,
and it's not a hard link to draw through a lot of it. So, um,
absolutely.
yeah, I just had a really good postpartum, but I did overdo it for the first few weeks. Like, I think I bled a lot longer than I probably should have because I kept just kind of re-exerting those like wounds almost.
Yeah, yeah. But that's so beautiful that, as a first time mom, you chose this path for yourself. And,
Mhm.
I mean, from my perspective, it's pretty clear that God guided you to this path because, it all just fell into place so beautifully. But
Mhm.
ultimately, you made the decision to take the steps to
Yeah,
be on that path. And I know that for so many women, including myself, um, having a sovereign birth for the first time is just like almost not even thought about because
yeah,
it's the first birth is like the trial run.
yeah,
Let's see how, how
yeah.
I do, and then maybe we'll do this next time.
Mhm.
But when you choose to have this experience from the very beginning, you just completely bypass the mess of what comes with having a medical birth, which is,
Yeah.
the potential to have birth trauma and then everything that comes with that and
Mhm.
harder postpartums and all of the whole thing. So I
And
just want to say like,
I definitely throughout pregnancy was still in the like telling people like, "Oh yeah, I'm having a midwife, she's there if anything happens, just whatever someone needed to hear so that they would not start freaking out." Um and I'm like, I'm not gonna like stifle my joy about it next time around. Like, that's some people, okay, fine, they don't need to know all the details, but other people, I think it normalizes it more. And
Hmm.
afterwards, when I told everyone, yeah, I had no medical professionals present. I chose to birth like in this way, like unassisted birth. And so many people
Yeah.
are like, oh my gosh, I didn't even know you could do that. And it
Yeah.
kind of healed things for like family members. Like my grandma, she now runs around telling everyone he was born into the water. It's like she loves it
I
now.
love that.
My mom, like, she was still holding on to stuff, like, and she never told me that she was nervous about it. But postpartum, she's like, I'm so glad everything went well. And now she's even like, I don't know why people still go to the hospital. Like, so just all this unraveling that has happened and like kind of healed a lineage. Like, my grandma was
Absolutely.
strapped down during her birth. So all
Wow.
this like trauma that now is like getting healed, and it's really cool to see. And hopefully, you know, down the line, my lineage is also continuing to do the healing on that. So,
Yeah, you have a different birth story to tell, from
hmm
you know, uh, your grandmother and your mom, like, where so many of us are told these really traumatic birth stories. And
hmm
so this is what we hold on to until we heal it and
yeah,
make a new, story to tell, which is sovereign birth, free birth, like literally just freeing yourself in birth. Like you don't have to be tied down to the medical system
yeah,
and you don't have to be controlled. Um and that's beautiful. That's a beautiful gift that you get to give to your family too, right? Like
yeah,
yeah, I totally can relate to that. I feel like I just in one birth just completely changed the narrative of birth in
yeah,
my family. And now my mom and my dad are just like so proud to tell their friends and whoever they can tell like my daughter gave birth at home by herself,
yeah,
like and then it blows people's minds, but like you said, it normalizes it. And it's
hmm
very understandable why people would want to withhold details, especially in like the very vulnerable time of pregnancy
hmm
into birth. You don't want to be having to, constantly fight, for your
hmm
choices, but, you know, it's also nice to be able to openly share and not really care what
yeah,
fears come up for people and, yeah, like really just normalize this way of giving birth. So I just want to say kudos to you for, doing that. I know it's really not super easy and it's pretty rare for first time moms to
yeah,
make this choice for themselves and for their babies. So
yeah,
I'm just so happy for you and I'm so happy that you shared your birth story on here for other women to hear. That they don't have to choose medical birth for the first time just because they
hmm
haven't experienced birth before.
yeah. And it's never too late to change your birth plan. If you feel like that tugging, like start to question it and poke and prod at it and see where it leads, because it's it's never too late to change your plan. And other
Absolutely.
people's opinions do not matter on it, because this is your birth and your baby.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Annalie. This was
Thank
lovely.
you. It was amazing being able to talk to you.